Hello, I'm Sarah Jack and I'm a therapist in lockdown in Dorset.
And I'm Annie Power, and I'm a therapist in lockdown in London. And the theme that we're looking at today is how the lockdown and the coronavirus may have impacted on couples' physical relationship, both sexual relationship and touch, general kind of touch. It's not difficult to see how the virus could be impacting on a sexual relationship, because there are two factors that could be quite disadvantageous. And the first is when we are carrying feelings of fear and anger, we're not going to be in the mood for being aroused. The human body doesn't work like that. If we're in more of a fight, flight, freeze mode, then the body isn't geared up for arousal and it's not likely to want to go down that pathway. And the other difficulty about lockdown, which I think a lot of couples are finding, is that being on top of each other 7 days a week is not conducive to sexual desire, which tends to thrive on a sense of separation and exoticness. And that can be a bit of a challenge in a long-term relationship at any time, and we'll say a bit about that later on. But for the moment, it was that acknowledgement that both the general everyday touch and the erotic touch are part of our well-being. Each of them causes a release of a particular set of feel-good chemicals in the body. So if a couple are getting less than usual of either general touch or erotic touch, they'll be missing it.
They're really good points, and I always remember hearing about the fact that you needed to have a 13-second hug to release the feel-good chemicals inside. I read the other day it was 20 seconds, but something like that. And I think it's very easy to have a much quicker hug than that for the average couple. But my thoughts are also about touch and how, you know, for the single people out there, for all the people that are in their own homes, but they are in a relationship, but they can't be with their partners right now. Maybe they haven't moved into the live-in stage of their relationship yet. For all the elderly, not able to have hugs with grandchildren, I think there's quite a deprivation of physical touch for an awful lot of people right now. And for some, they're really going to feel they're going to disappear if they don't get touch. It is vitally important. For others, they're not going to notice if they don't have hugs, whatever their attachment style, for the next 30 years. But for some, it really is going to feel a sense of, I don't exist unless I'm touched, unless I'm held.
And I think it's useful to think about how this experience of touch and sex fits into the attachment dynamics that we've been talking about in all the videos, the relationship between pursuer and withdrawer, because of course it comes in the bedroom and it comes in general touch around the house. And very frequently, the person who has the more preoccupied style, the pursuer, is the one who wants more touch. And indeed, the research about how attachment styles and sexuality correlate indicates that people with an avoidance style, as one might expect, enjoy more kind of detached forms of sexual pleasure and one-night stands, and people with a more preoccupied ambivalent style enjoy kind of the cuddling side is their favorite bit of it. And so you already have a kind of difference of emphasis in the couple. And people do have different motivations for having sex. It's a question that isn't asked that often, but what is it that makes a person, any particular individual, desire sex? And there really are different motivations, because for a more preoccupied person, it is more about the cuddling and closeness, less about the excitement and release. And one of the, we talked about caregiving and care-seeking skills. And I think when it comes to physical relationship, there's something a bit similar about being able to ask in a friendly way that doesn't convey reproach, and being able to say no in a friendly way that doesn't convey rejection. And they're quite high-level skills, and it's somewhere that often a pursuer and withdrawer get into a problem, that the asking for sex is done in a reproachful way, or the saying no is is done almost wordlessly in a which can amount to quite a rejecting move. So for a couple to learn to say no is quite important. And a lot of couples will say, oh, we never say no. But I think that's a bit like saying we never have a row. If there's no possibility of saying no, it makes it tricky to know whether you can ask. In the thinking about this attachment styles and sex, there's Susan Johnson, who writes a lot on attachment and couple, has quite a nice adage for this. And she suggests that preoccupied people have solace sex, avoidant people have sealed off sex, and secure people have synchrony sex. So the thinking there is that the synchrony sex is about the two partners being attuned. The sealed off sex, which is the avoidance style, is about being somewhere else in your mind whilst you're having your sex. And the solace sex is that preoccupied people, it's a kind of comfort blanket.
I think they're really good thoughts. And in the secure relationship, parties have a sense that the other isn't going to fold and is going to be able to recover from what is a little rejection. Whereas in the avoidant and the preoccupied, if one party says no, it could lead to a huge rejection on either behalf. And my thoughts have been, like yourself, quite similar, in as much as the preoccupied can very much be wanting to seek out reassurance from sex. You know, it can tap into that unfillipable part of her or him, in as much as this can top them up, this can make them feel close. They will be seeking out more closeness from sex than the avoidant, who might really want to steer clear of sex altogether, or, you know, turn off from sex and go off and have an affair. More we'll talk about in our next video. But also that with the avoidant, they're absolutely going to be trying to steer clear of anything too intimate and too close, too affectionate, maybe even too fun, because they can't let themselves be spontaneous in that way. So they'll be seeking out sex from a place of maybe stress release or for their own needs, but not so much about couple needs or a connection, because that's just way too dangerous for them.
I think I'm following all those points. And the first one you made about secure people feel more able to say no because they don't expect their partner to feel rejected. They don't attribute that kind of fragility. They don't need to attribute fragility to their partner because they can rely on them, to trust them, to know that they're loved. And they're probably also more careful about conveying that the partner is loved. Because I think people can tolerate not having intercourse, but not feeling not loved is too much. There is a very ongoing debate about sexual desire in long-term attachment relationships. There's a kind of a difference of opinion amongst different theorists about whether it is really, whether a long-term, secure, stable relationship, such as most people, obviously not everyone, but most people desire. It's something that a lot of people desire, and they want a monogamous exclusive relationship. But the question is, can sexual pleasure really thrive in that kind of stable monogamous relationship that most people want? And the argument on one side is that it can't thrive because we're sort of evolved and designed to seek something more exciting and different that's what excites us sexually very often. And that something that's too comfortable and familiar will not be exciting in that way. That's the sort of bad news point of view. The good news point of view, there is a good news point of view for monogamous relationships. And that is that if we feel secure in a relationship, our attachment is secure, we experience the other person as reliable, warm, responsive, and engaged. And we also feel able to explore, is that story from the last video about the little child who, when they feel secure in their mother's proximity in the park, they don't have to feel frightened of the dog and they can go and explore. And it's the same in a sexual relationship, that we can be really curious and explorative in a relationship if we feel safe enough. So I don't think, I think it's quite a very real debate. I think there are points either side, but I don't think it's all one way.
I think too that if a couple are able to live with the fact that life and sex isn't going to be so exciting in a long-term relationship, and sex is going to become more ordinary, but that doesn't, mean that it's not going to offer a wonderful connection and relief, to a partnership. And I think coming back to what you were saying about whether parties are turned on or not, I think the avoidant party can see much more of a turn on ongoingly if they're somewhat unavailable to the preoccupied. But if the preoccupied falls into patterns of helplessness or clinginess or neediness in order to try and get some attention from her partner, that really isn't much of a turn on at all. It might also be that the avoidant is able to, through the affair outside of the relationship, keep themselves both remote and close in a way that doesn't get anywhere near their dependency feelings, doesn't go anywhere near their longings or things that they've buried deep down, like feelings.
The point you made there that I think is particularly relevant to times of coronavirus is the bit about sex becoming more, let's say, ordinary. I think that was the word you used, in a long-term relationship. And one of the points that can come up there is the issue about timetabling sex, which can be, many couples, quite apart from lockdown, evolve that sort of a way of kind of sustaining their sexual relationship because it works quite well for them. Others are kind of horrified at the idea that it not be spontaneous, that it be sort of booked in the diary. But in lockdown, so many people all in the home together and no one ever going out, it may be particularly necessary for a couple to be prepared to have some element of timetabling if they're going to be able to be intimate together, because just waiting for the perfect moment, it really might never come.
Yes, and then that might be difficult for some to actually get into it at all. It really may not work to have it controlled in that way. And for others, probably the more secure, they will be able to not see this as a controlling thing or a restrictive thing, but manage to make the transition into the experience and get each other going.
Well, with that nice, vivid ending, we'll leave it there. Thank you for listening. The problem is the pattern. It's not my partner. The problem is not my partner's behaviour. It's the pattern we're both drawn into.